Hey, good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. All right. I know it's been a long day, and we have the opportunity to come before him with thanksgiving now. We have something sweet to offer him tonight, right? And it's our praise, and it's our love, it's our adoration. So we're going to give that to him now. You ready for that? Are you ready for that? All right.
Kings and kingdoms will bow down. want to encourage you guys in this next song to make the choice to praise him, to make the decision to align our hearts with heaven, with God's will for our life. A lot of times we look at things from our perspective and not a heavenly perspective. So I encourage you guys to ask the Lord to remind you of who he is and the position that he holds in your life. The things that he can do are far greater than we could ever understand, far greater. And he will do them. So I encourage you guys to ask, as we will also be asking the Lord to help us to align our hearts with his will, with his desire for our lives, that we wouldn't look at things the way we normally do. Amen. You go before I know that you've even gone to win my war, and you come back with the head of my enemy, and you come back and you call it my victory. Oh. You go before I know that you've even gone to win my war. Your love becomes my greatest defense. It leads me from the dry wilderness, and all I did was praise. And all I did was worship. And all I did was bow down. And all I did was stay still. Sing hallelujah. And hallelujah, you have saved me so much better this way. And hallelujah, great defender, so much better your way. You know before I do, when my heart can seek to find your truth, your mercy is the shade I'm living in, and you restore my faith and hope again. And all I did was praise, and all I did was worship. sing that again. I want to sing that one more time. I think we need to remind our hearts. We need to remind our hearts what the Lord is doing, what he has done, what he will continue to do. He's the defender of our hearts, the defender of our lives. His love is unconditional. It's not based on anything we can do or we can't do. He loves us. He loves us. He loves us. He loves us. And not for a moment did he leave our side. Not for a moment. So we're going to sing that, knowing this truth. We're going to sing that one more time, okay? Because when I thought I'd lost me, you knew where I'd left. You introduced me to your love, and you picked up on, you put me back together. You are the defender of my heart. Amen. We give you all the glory, Lord, all the glory, for you are so worthy, the defender of our hearts. Thank you, God. Thank you. We can't say thank you enough for the work that you're constantly doing in and through us. But even more so for who you are, that it doesn't change. You are good. You are a defender. You are a counselor. You are everything we could ever desire, and anything that we seek on this earth, you fulfill all those things. Peace. You are peace. Everything that we could ever desire to bring us peace is found in you. It's found in you. You are peace. You carry peace. Thank you, God, that we can look to you and everything be fulfilled, everything, because you lack nothing. You are perfect in every way. In all of your ways, you are good, and you don't change. So we magnify your name today, and we thank you, God, for the work that you have done in and through us. Oh, Lord, would you please align our hearts and our minds, Lord, to seek heaven, to look to heaven, to not look with what we see with our eyes, but to have an eternal perspective on the things that you're doing. Yeah, things get hard. Sometimes things are really bad, but sometimes things are great. But we thank you that you're still God. You always come through. It's who you are. You lack nothing. Just because we think our timing should work a little bit differently means nothing, because you are always on time. You are outside of time. So we praise you, Lord, and we magnify your name, and we thank you. What more can we say but thank you? We give back what you've first given to us. So unworthy of it, but we give it back. We love you, Lord, and it's in your precious name that we pray. Amen.
Hey, Calvary family, isn't it good to be refreshed in the middle of the week? So good. God picks up all our pieces, puts us back together. That is the faithful promise of God. We are so glad that you guys are here tonight. Good evening, welcome to all of our campuses. And so if you're here tonight and you're wondering like, hey, where is everybody? This campus is filled with classes that are full of people, because we are in the middle of a 5-week class series where about 15 classes are being offered all over this campus. The class that's in here is a class that's going to be on communication. We are in the 4th of this 5-week series on communication. And tonight, we're going to talk about how to have hard conversations. How many of you have a difficult time having a hard conversation? All right, so if you want to talk about that, if you know what your class is, we're going to ask you to go to that. We're going to take a few-minute break while people go to their class. If you want to move closer, you can move in. We also want to invite you to a vision launch party that's happening after this service directly behind the grill. We'd love for you to be a part, just to see what God's been doing vision-wise in our church and how you can be a part. And there's also a survey that you can take of this class, that while you're sitting here, you can actually take the survey on your phone, or you can decide to talk to a friend. In 3 minutes, we are going to introduce week 4 of this class on communication. So take that time right now, get to know a neighbor, move up, take the survey. We'll see you in 3 minutes.
No other king could vanquish the warhorse or silence the warrior's rage while riding the lowly back of a donkey. No other king could break the dominion of darkness, the tyranny of evil, with a reign of grace and a kingdom of peace. No other king could give his life for the redemption of rebels, his wealth to welcome the outcast. Jesus is that king, the King of glory, Son of the living God. Not just another king, not just another prophet, not just another teacher. He was the one the world had been waiting for, the one to deliver us from captivity, the Son of David and Abraham's chosen seed. He is the goal of the Mosaic law, Yahweh in the flesh. He is the one to establish God's reign and rule, to heal the sick, give sight to the blind, freedom to the prisoners, and proclaim good news to the poor. This Jesus was the Creator come to earth and the beginning of a new creation. He embodied the covenant, fulfilled the commandments, and reversed the curse. This Jesus is the Christ that God spoke of to the serpent, the one prefigured to Noah in the flood, the one promised to Abraham, the one guaranteed to Moses before he died, the one promised to David during his reign, the one revealed to Isaiah as a suffering servant, the one predicted through the prophets and prepared for through John the Baptist. He is the Father's Son, Savior of the world, and substitute for our sins. More loving, more holy, and more wonderfully terrifying than we ever thought possible. He is our Jesus, and there is no other king like him. He is our God, our glory, our victorious Savior. There is no other king like him. There is no other king.
Good evening, Calvary Chapel. Good evening. Welcome. Thank you for the 3 people that like me. Joking. I don't know. I'm kidding. If you don't know who I am, my name is Chris Basilici. I get to serve as the campus pastor at the Plantation campus. I want to give a shout out to Plantation right now. Any of those that are watching online or at any of our other campuses, we are one church meeting in many locations. And you heard Pastor Doug say that tonight, as we continue this study looking at communication, these teachings on how we can become better communicators, tonight we're going to talk about hard conversations, confrontation. And I hope you start to see this theme as you've been here for the past few Wednesday nights, and you start to see, man, communication, it's actually extremely important when it comes to my relationships and all the relationships that we have in our lives. But it's interesting when you think about relationships, because relationships are made up of people, and people have issues. Anyone have issues in here? Anyone? Just me? Okay. You all got issues. If you don't have your hand up, you got an issue. We all have issues. And so when you think about, wow, so there's relationships in my life, they're made up of people. We all have issues. Many times those issues find their way into our relationships. And there will be times for all of us that we're going to be called to have a hard conversation with someone to address those problems that are affecting our relationships. It's called confrontation. And I know Pastor Doug asked, but let me see one more time. How many of you in here, like, you love having confrontational conversations? How many of you, like, you're good at that? Okay. I hate them. Like, it petrifies me. I get my stomach all in knots, and I'm a black and white kind of person. But when I start to think about, okay, I got to sit down with this person, I got to talk to them, I got to bring up this issue, something happens in me. And it's interesting that over the past few weeks, as I knew I was going to have to teach on this specific issue, how God, with his sense of humor, put many opportunities for me to have difficult conversations and confrontations with people in my life. When you think about it, some of you are like, man, yeah, you know, I don't do really well with those kinds of conversations. They're intimidating, it's scary. And why is that when we think about confrontation, that it's something that makes us nervous? So thinking about it, probably because we sometimes have a slightly warped understanding of what confrontation is. And either that's because we've had bad examples in our lives or we've had bad experiences. And many times fear sets in and it prevents a conversation that has to do with confrontation from happening. Because we start to think, oh, well, I might be rejected. Or that person might say, hey, why are you meddling in some business that has nothing to do with you? Or we might actually get pulled into a situation that's going to cost us time, effort, and energy. And what I know about people is, yes, we want to tell the truth, but many times we will only tell the truth until it gets costly. And once the truth becomes costly, we trade the truth for peace. And I'll be honest as we start tonight. Listen, conflict is costly, but we must be willing to enter into chaos in our relationships. And I'll kind of paint that picture for you tonight. But I think we should start with a definition for confrontation. Confrontation comes from the Latin term that means to turn your face toward, to look at frontally. Very important we understand this. The word confrontation means to turn your face toward and to look at frontally. So what does that mean? It means that when you're entering into conflict or confrontation with a person, you are turning toward that relationship or person face to face. You're facing some kind of issue in the relationship that you need to deal with. And I know that sometimes we think of confrontation as, oh man, that's someone that's angry. They're really upset about something. But I hope we walk out of here tonight and we realize that confrontation is really driven by love. It's a form of love. It's us valuing someone and valuing a relationship so much that we're not going to turn away, we're going to turn towards it. Face to face, we can't ignore it anymore. And I think for most of us, we want to avoid confrontation. We just think, man, maybe if I ignore it long enough, it'll go away. Anyone ever do that in a relationship? Like you see something that's off, you're like, I'm not going to address that. Maybe if I ignore it long enough, it'll just disappear. You know what I found? That when I do that, many times those things actually get worse. There's a term they use now in some of these like anti-bullying campaigns, see it, say it. If you walk out here with anything today, when you think about confrontation in the different relationships of your life, see it, say it. See it and say it. Now, maybe not in that exact moment, but you're not to let things go undiscussed for any long amount of time. Because what we need to understand is that confrontation is actually a tool to solve the problems in our relationships. While avoiding it, well, many times it can actually make those problems worse. So, who are some of the people and what are some of the relationships that we can have confrontation? Anyone married? Okay. So I was thinking about this, every good marriage has confrontation. And maybe you're thinking, well, then I must have a great marriage. But the truth is that as we enter into one of the close quarter relationships of marriage, many times we will find opportunities to have confrontation. And it could be finances. It could be child rearing. It could be intimacy. It could be the in-laws. It could be something that I find sometimes in my house, how to put the dishes correctly into the dishwasher, because I'm very big on that and my wife is not, so there's times when we have strong fellowship about that. Anyone have a boyfriend or a girlfriend you're courting, you're seeing someone right now? Anyone here? Many times when you enter into that kind of relationship, there's differences in values and boundaries. Hey, where's this relationship going? I mean, it seems like you're just messing around and I'm thinking about marriage. And for some it's that one conversation of, you know what, this needs to end. And you see that there's also needs for confrontation with just having friends. Anyone have a friend? I hope everyone's got a friend. Anyone have a friend? We have friends. We have confrontations with them about their life choices and how they're investing their time and maybe other friendships or relationships that they're involved in. Children, oh my goodness, children. Rules and behavior and patterns and chores and grades and life choices. Many times I find opportunities for confrontation and conflict with my kids. So as we look at all these different areas of our lives and all the different relationships we have, we see that there are many people and many different relationships that we can have confrontation in. But maybe you're thinking, well, what's the reason? When do I know it's time to step into confrontation? Well, it's 3 reasons, and if you're a note taker, one of them is simply this: telling people what you want. Telling people what you want. Many times people don't get what they want in a relationship where they could if they just knew how to communicate their desires. And so you're in a relationship and man, the conversations, they're kind of surfacey. and you want to go deeper, but you've never had the confrontation to say, I want deeper conversations. Or I want respect, or I want to have times of family prayer. I want you, when you come home from school, to do your chores before you go outside and play with your friends. I want to hang out like we used to hang out. It seems like since you got this new job, man, we're not hanging out the way that we used to. And we find some of our relationships frustrating, and we feel unfulfilled. But we don't want to bring those things up to those people in our lives because it might get weird, and man, we don't want to mess with that in their lives. And so many times when you look at your relationships and you see one of those where it's like, I'm not getting what I want out of this, and not in a selfish way, but in ways where it's feeling unfulfilled, something tangible, something real that you could simply sit down with someone and say, hey, I want to see this in our relationship. It is one reason why you might enter into conflict. Another reason, a second point, making someone aware of a problem. Making someone aware of a problem. Only to the extent that someone becomes aware of a problem are they able to take responsibility for that problem. Anyone have blind spots in here? You all have blind spots. We all have blind spots. You might think, no, I'm good, I'm perfect. No, you're not. There's areas of your life that you can't see. We have blind spots, but other people can. And part of a relationship is that you allow other people to lovingly enter into conflict with you, to point out those areas where there might be a problem in your life. I love Galatians chapter 2. Galatians chapter 2, there's the Apostle Paul. He's saying, listen, one of my best friends is Peter, but there was that one time when Peter, when he was kind of not hanging out with the Gentiles and he was only eating with the Jews, he's like, I had to tell him to his face, what are you doing, bro? Like, you're misrepresenting the gospel, and there in this relationship is conflict. He says, there's a problem in your life, and I've got to tell you. And I've got to tell you because I love you. And so maybe you have a relationship. Someone at work, it's a friend, and you start to notice things where there's a problem. You know, I noticed that in conversations, you always start to talk over the other person, and people shut down. Did you notice that? No, I never noticed that. Man, thank you for telling me. I noticed that at work, when things start to get stressful, you start to take it out on the other employees, and people are starting to get kind of upset about that. Have you noticed that? No, I never realized that I was doing that. Hey, your post on social media lately. Now, I know you're really passionate about whatever that is, but I got to tell you, the things that you're saying and the posts that you're putting up there, I mean, it's kind of misrepresenting who I know that you are. Did you realize that? No, I didn't. And what we need to understand is this aspect of confrontation is motivated by love. I'm going to confess. I'm going to do a lot of confessing here today. So I was at a store with my son, and the person that was showing us some clothes, they had something in their nose. Okay, so I'm sorry to gross you out. So we're going about it like there's nothing wrong. And I'm like, oh my gosh, should I say something? Like, I've got to say, I didn't say anything. And me and my son didn't even talk about it, but I was driving home, I was like, why didn't I say something? Like, why wouldn't I be bold enough to say, hey, you got someone up there, like, just clear that up? Because I didn't know them and I didn't love them. You see, I'm cool with my friends. Like, if we're in that kind of situation and we're out in something like in their teeth, or I got no problem stopping everything, but like, bro, you got something in your teeth. Because I love them and I know that it might be embarrassing, but I want to save them from further embarrassment if I see a problem in their life. And so what we need to understand is that it's not something that isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's motivated by love. And when we see a problem in one of our friends' lives, God has placed us there for a very specific purpose and reason so that we might see that and address it. But not only is it pointing out a problem, the third reason you might enter into confrontation is stopping a behavior. Stopping a behavior. Now, this is a little bit more serious. Hey, I've noticed that, man, you've been late to work at least 3 days every week for the past month. Is something going on? Hey, I've noticed that when we go out lately and we're having dinner, we're having like 3 and 4 drinks of alcohol. I mean, what's going on? Is there something happening there? Catching you in a lot of lies lately. I see that you're being verbally abusive to one of your kids, and you're really insensitive. You're making poor relationship choices. That person that you're dating, you know you shouldn't be in a relationship with them. And so these things get a little bit more serious. This is sinful and destructive behaviors that you might see in someone's life that actually this kind of conversation, it actually turns out to be a lifesaver. You save someone from damage and pain in their lives. And I was kind of doing this research and looking at those that struggle with addiction. And what they found is that those who find themselves addicted to some kind of drug or alcohol, they don't live in a vacuum. It's not like it's just them by themselves and they've got no friends and no family, and somehow they were really bored, they had nothing else to do, and then they found this drug of choice. No, what they found is that there were family members and friends around those people. And they watched from afar and they started to see things go downhill, but rather than say something because they didn't want to make them uncomfortable or make them feel bad, they avoided conflict and confrontation. And what happens is we actually end up enabling people by not confronting them. And so these are some of the reasons that when you look at your relationships, man, when do I know? How should I know to enter into these kind of conversations? Telling people what they want to hear is not love. You got to understand that. Telling people what they want to hear is not love. It's actually cruelty. And entering into conflict, though is hard, is one of the most loving things that we can do. I want to read you a quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Listen to this quote. "Nothing can be more cruel than the leniency which abandons others to sin. Nothing can be more compassionate than the severe reprimand which calls another Christian in one's community back from the path of sin." He says, nothing can be more cruel than seeing someone engaged in a sinful pattern in their life and you don't say anything. And so you see, conflict is so important in people's lives. And I know it's an area of communication where we sometimes shy away from it. And there's these practical reasons of why we would dive into that. But even more than that, there's biblical ones. I'll read you some verses. You can write these down in your notes. Proverbs 24, 11 and 12. Listen to what it says there. "Rescue those that are being led away to death. Hold back those staggering towards slaughter. If you say, but we knew nothing about this," another translation says, "Hey, that's none of my business. Does not he who weighs the heart perceive it?" So the writer of Proverbs says, when you see someone and they're starting to drift and fall and slide into some sinful pattern, and you say, "Oh, that's none of my business," he says, God sees your heart. He knows. And you know that God has called you to confront those kind of situations. In Ezekiel chapter 3, verse 18, it says, "When I say to a wicked person, you will surely die, and you do not warn them or speak out to dissuade them from their evil ways in order to save their life, that wicked person will die for their sin, and I will hold you accountable for their blood." Here's what I want us to see, church. That God has called us to confront those people that he's placed in our lives. Though it can be extremely uncomfortable, though it might seem scary, though you might have had bad experiences in your life, when it comes to that, it is one of the most loving things that you can do to confront people in your life. And what are some of the benefits? One of them is simply this, that healthy confrontation promotes growth. In relationships where people are just all gracious and loving and there's no confrontation, people just stay who they are. There's no growth emotionally, spiritual, or relationally. We need to enter into confrontation in those areas. And of course, we can't change someone, but we can be agents of change in people's lives. Proverbs 27:6 says, "Faithful are the wounds of a friend." If I want anyone to speak into my life to spur me on to growth, I don't want it to be someone who doesn't know me, who doesn't love me or care for me. I want to hear from a friend. And many times that can be uncomfortable, but it's one of those things that grow us in our relationships is confrontation. And another opportunity is this, that your confrontation to a loved one may be a wake-up call that they actually need. That it may affirm something they knew in the back of their mind, but they were afraid to admit it. And so I saw this actually played out over the past couple weeks. I've got a friend, and I really do. This isn't about me. I got a friend, and we have a mutual friend. And God is working and moving in this guy's life, and we see it, but there was this thing that we needed to address, and it was extremely personal. And I've got to change names and stuff to protect these people. But so we're sitting there talking, and my friend's about to go have lunch with this guy that we're looking into his life. And he's like, "Man, I've got to bring this up, and I've got to talk about it, and I don't even know how I'm going to bring it up because it's such a sensitive subject." And so he goes out to lunch. He comes back. I'm like, "So how did it go?" He's like, "Man, I sat there. I brought it up, and he started to get emotional." And he's like, "Oh, man, did I really hurt this guy's feelings or something?" He's like, "No, my wife and I, we've been talking about this. We feel like God's been speaking to us about this. And you saying this to me right now, though it's hard, has confirmed what God has been speaking to us. And see, we need to look at confrontation like that. Again, that God has divinely and sovereignly placed you in people's lives. And if he shows you something that you know is a little bit off, one of the great benefits is you're actually used as a tool in the hand of God to help someone grow. And though that was a difficult conversation to have, man, I think it's going to be the start of something amazing in this guy's life. And so it promotes growth and it can confirm what God is doing, but a good confrontation can also preserve a relationship. Many times people will come into my office and they'll want to talk because there's issues, and I'll say, well, tell me what's the issue, and people will start to go back a few months, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, and I'm like, how have you guys been going on in this relationship, and you've had these issues from years ago? Well, we just never talked about it. Kind of just brushed it under the rug and thought, hey, well, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to ruffle feathers. Let's just move on. Let's not get hung up on that. And I don't want you to do that either, but there are times when you need to confront each other in things because it actually ends up preserving the relationship in the future. Because if things go unsaid and unconfronted, those things just build up in someone's heart. And many of you know, you've been in a relationship like that where one day, boom, it's just this huge explosion. And things from years past, they start to come out and you're like, man, I thought we got past that. And she's like, no, I never got past that. We never talked about it. And what I've seen in relationships is that some of the best relationships are ones that constantly have confrontational conversations. Strengthens them. But though there's benefits to confrontation, there's dangers. So maybe you're thinking, all right, I'm excited about being a confronter. I'm just going to go out now and I'm going to just criticize everybody. Careful. And Pastor Doug mentioned this before. A critical spirit is not a spiritual gift. And so if you're the person that's excessively negative and you have this attitude and you're always like judging everything, you're like an expert fault finder, that is not what I am talking about. Because many of us know those people who speak the truth with no love. They'll try to cover it and be like, well, I'm just a critical thinker. No, you're not. You just got a critical spirit. Huge difference. A critical thinker is looking at things, and yes, they'll notice things that are wrong, but they'll also come up with ways to make it better. A critical spirit, that's wrong, I don't like the carpet in here, I don't like the lighting, this guy's got tattoos, get him off the stage. This is what a critical spirit is. And you're just pointing out things that are wrong. Or sometimes they'll cover it and spiritualize it and say, well, I'm just a prophet. And let me say this in love. There's a difference between a prophet and a jerk. So, when you look at the scriptures, though certainly there are those who speak on behalf of God and they say hard things, one of the traits of a prophet is there is a deep love for God and a deep love for the people they're speaking to. But the person with the critical spirit could care less. Let me just point out things that are wrong. So there's this danger in it, so be careful about that. And so we know what it is. We know the people that we might have to confront. We know the why. We know the benefits. Here's the nitty-gritty that I want us to kind of dig into tonight. How to have a difficult conversation. How do we do it? What are some tips? One is this: be emotionally present. Be emotionally present. Being in touch and in tune with your own feelings as well as the person that you're talking to, because it's hard for anyone to absorb confrontation. And so for you to be present, it helps them to kind of tolerate the things that you're saying. So body language is huge. So if you're going to go into a confrontation, you're just like this: I got to tell you something, man. Things that you've been doing, like you're really upsetting me. Like you're all wrong right there. Okay, I was sitting in my office this week, and what I've realized is I sometimes have to have confrontational conversations with people in my life in my office, and I sit on the side of a desk. But I came into my office, and this guy was sitting in my desk. He said, you want me to get up? I'm like, no, sit there. And I sat on the other side, and I'm like, this is where people sit when I have these conversations with them, and I'm so far away, and there's this distance. I'm like, never again. Never again. I want to get close. I want to be eye to eye. I want them to see in my eyes that I genuinely care for them. The verbal language that I use, I want to be warm. Even though it can be uncomfortable, it doesn't mean you have to be angry or detached. Proverbs 25:15 says, patient persistence pierces through indifference. Gentle speech breaks down rigid defenses. You need to be emotionally present to bring down the other person's defenses so that they can receive the things that you're going to say. And you've got to work at I'm a cold person normally. I'm just not an emotional guy. I've got to work at that. You've got to think about these things before you enter into this. And when you're in a conversation with someone, remember that's not a lecture. So as you bring up your point and you start to talk and they say, but, no, I'm going to say what I say first and you're not going to talk at all. You're not going to interrupt me. No, you don't do that. It's a conversation. You want to have a conversation with someone. You want to give them opportunities to speak even when you might disagree with their stance. Because here's the truth, you might be wrong. And maybe you've only got a little piece of the information and you don't really understand what happened. You want to give them the benefit of the doubt. I love in 1 Corinthians 13 when it talks about love, it says, love believes all things and hopes all things. And though you might think of someone right now, you're like, I got to confront them. But you might not have the full story. So when you enter into that situation and into that conversation, make sure you're giving them the benefit of the doubt. It's not the arms crossed and the really sour tone. No, you want to come into it as a friend. And let me say this, because of this very tip, confrontation is never to be done electronically. You guys get that? I need everyone to get that. It is not to be done via text, via email, on Facebook, in your DM, on Instagram, none of that. Because text and email, it seems very cold. And you can't pick up tone when it's typed out. And so let me say, if you're the type of person that likes to enter into confrontation via electronics, don't do it. Stop. You need to be emotionally present and engage with someone. Not only that, you need to be clear about the you and the I. And you're like, what does that even mean, be clear about the you and the I? Problems arise in relationships because you got two different people. Different thoughts, different opinions, different ways of doing life. And you need to kind of make sure you're differentiating between those two things. And so what do I mean? To differentiate between the you and the I, you might say to someone, you need to spend less time on social media. And you might think, well, that's something okay to say. But they might be thinking, I don't need to spend less time on social media. I don't think there's anything wrong with how much I spend on social media. The better way to say it is, I need for you to spend less time on social media. And you're like, that's so weird. How does that even make a difference? Because when we start to put on people, hey, this is what you need. Oh, you know what I need? No. Even something so subtle like that can automatically bring up someone's defenses. The wife who's sick and tired on Sunday of watching 12 hours of NFL, she's done. She could say something like, you probably need to not watch so much football on Sunday. She could say that, and he's thinking, actually, I need to watch more. Or she could say, I don't want to watch 12 hours of football. I would actually like to go out for dinner. And you're like, I don't even see the big difference. It is huge. Because again, when you're telling someone what they need, you need to speak from your need and not from theirs. Maybe you're at work and someone's always late to meetings. You could say, you need to be more punctual. I don't think I need to be more punctual. If I get there 5 minutes late, no big deal. But you could sit there and say, I need you to start being on time for these meetings. It's important. And these are just little subtle things that if you don't take heed to this, walls go up, even unconsciously. So they're thinking, oh, you're telling me what I need to do? And now already there's a barrier between the two of you. And you want to try to communicate in such a way where walls are down. And if you're not clear about the you and the I in confrontation, the other person might feel like you're trying to control them. Walls go up. Be clear about the you and the I. Clarify the problem. Clarify the problem. I mean, I can't be clearer on this, that you need to be clear. You need to be clear about the nature of the problem with the other person, because it's this inability to focus on the problem itself that ends up in bringing about confusion and distance and alienation, and you never come to a resolution of the problem itself. You need to make this problem as understandable as possible. What do I mean? You got a roommate? Anyone have a roommate here? Anyone? Only 4 people have roommates? Okay. I mean, I can remember growing up in college and having all these roommates. Don't say to your roommate, your inefficient organizational procedures in regards to communal living is frustrating me. Don't say that. What did you say? Say, hey man, when you finish using the roll of toilet paper, would you please replace it? That's more clear than saying something very vague. You need to stay away from generalities like, oh, you're messy, or your time management stinks, or your attitude stinks, or you feel distant. You need to be very clear and don't lose focus on the one issue you want to talk about and end up going over a whole list of offenses that overwhelms the other person. Has anyone ever come to you with just this whole list and it's like a fire hose and they're blasting you with 8 million things? Oh yeah, not only the toilet paper, but could you stop leaving the soap in the sink and where that is, and you're all these things that have been pent up in them for months. If you've got issues and you haven't addressed them, that's on you, but you need to kind of go back and take it one at a time, and you need to be clear about those things, and you need to clarify the effect of that problem and how it's affecting you. What is it doing to your relationship? Now, this is so important because this helps the other person who may not be aware of what they're doing that it affects you. So let me give you an example. I don't have hobbies. I don't garden. I don't like to keep my car nice and clean. I could care less about that stuff. I do like my beard. My beard is like my hobby. So I like to keep it, groomed. And I'm under the assumption that my wife loves that too. And hey, she wants my beard to be groomed. And there's a lot that goes into this. I don't want to share it because you might think I'm really weird. It's okay. So there's product in this, and there's times throughout the day when I'll go in the bathroom and I'll trim off the little things, and I'm thinking, okay, no big deal, and I'll go back, I'll clean that later. My wife, in a recent conversation of confrontation, expressed how upset it makes her to walk in the bathroom and see clippings in the sink. And I'm like, that's not a big deal. I'll get to it eventually. But she's like, no, you need to understand that when I walk in there and I see that, it makes me go crazy. I never knew. And this is why I'm saying you need to be clear about what the problem is, and you need to be clear about how it's affecting you. You want to help someone be aware about how what they're doing is affecting you. And it helps because it lets them know that you're not judging them. You're simply telling them that there's something that they're doing that is having a negative effect on you and it's hurting you. And clarify your desire for change. Don't just sit there and say, oh, you're doing this wrong and this is upsetting me. You've got to come into it with some structure and some possible solutions. Hey, I know that this is happening, but maybe we could try this. And what you find is that people who confront well, they make a clear request for change from the other person. Hey, I feel really distant lately since you've gotten this new job and you're working all these hours. And it kind of makes me sad that we're not able to spend time. Do you think it might be possible that maybe one night a week we could have a date night again? You see, you've expressed what the issue is and how it makes you feel, but you've also given them this solution. Hey, bud, I've seen your grades are going down in school. You got to know that hurts my heart because I just want you to succeed. I want you to do well there. So here's what we're going to try. How about when you come home from now on, rather than jumping on Fortnite for 7 hours, we're going to get into schoolwork for about an hour. Yeah, it can get crazy. And so you need to come with some solutions. And the emphasis is not on renovating the entire person, which can be overwhelming, but on solving a specific problem. The next tip in confrontation: balance, grace, and truth. Balance, grace, and truth. Grace is you being on the side of and for that person. And what we need here is to neutralize too heavy of an emphasis on grace or too heavy of an emphasis on truth. In Jesus, he was the perfect mix. John 1:17, it says, by Moses came the law, but through Jesus came grace and truth. And you need to lead in these conversations with grace. You need to come in letting them know that you are for them. Hey, before we get into this topic, I want you to know that I really care about you and our relationship, and I'm for us, and I want there to be a better us. So I hope that from this we get better. You're showing them that you're for them because you need to understand which way you kind of lean more. Who's super gracious people in here? Super grace, almost like you let people walk. No one, listen, we're people of grace. That's crazy. I am Mr. Black and White, Mr. Truth, so I tend to lean on the side of legalism. And I need to make sure that I'm balanced in those things. And we need to make sure that when we enter into these confrontations, there's both. And I can remember even in college, and they would talk about, how to confront someone. And it was kind of like this sandwich, you start with something good, and in the middle, like there's the bad thing, and then there's the other thing. Don't do that. No, don't do a sandwich because it can seem like three different conversations. Hey, I really love you and appreciate you. Man, you're really messing up, and it's really upsetting me, and I'm kind of sick of it, and you need to change things around, but man, I'm really for you. Like, it's just, forget the sandwich, think of a smoothie. Like everything blended in, and you have everything together, grace and truth together. You need to find out a way to weave these things together. Hey, before we get into this topic, I need you to know, like, I see that you're not kind of getting your work in on time, and I know that you can do so much better than that. Like, I've seen you excel. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to have you have your work in a day early from now on, but I'm going to work with you on this, and I'm going to help you develop a system to do this because, again, I'm for you, and, like, it's all woven in together. And this takes practice. Like, you need to practice these confrontational conversations. You need to be aware of your imbalances. And if you're going to err on the side of anything, you err on the side of grace. If you're going to err on the side of anything, err on the side of grace, because I can tell you that legalistic truth part can end up doing more damage than extra grace can. So make sure you know where your imbalance is and think about what you're going to say and find a way to make that smoothie, not a sandwich. Here's another point. Use the formula, when you do A, I feel B. And I'll explain that to you. That one of the most powerful and effective ingredients of a good confrontation is explaining to the other person how their actions are influencing you. And few actions are more vulnerable than letting someone know, hey, what you're doing is affecting me. And what you need to do here is, first of all, you need to avoid saying things like, what you do makes me feel, because even that seems accusatory. You want to say this in such a, like, here's an example. I have a son with special needs. And there was a time when we were in a group of people, and one of the guys kept using the word retarded. And it was just something that they would say, like, haphazardly, and I had to pull him aside and say, hey, I need you to know, like, when you use that word, I feel kind of disheartened and it hurts me because I've got a son with special needs. Now, I'm not attacking him. I'm just saying, when you said this, I felt this. And if there is a real loving relationship there, if you can enter into that and say, and again, not you make me feel this way because you're like, you're contorting me and you're making me feel this way. No, when this happened and when you did this, I felt this way. When you do A, I feel B. And you want to concentrate on your feelings. And for me, I mean, this is one of the most difficult things in the world, because if you ask me, like, hey, how do you feel? It's like happy, hungry, sleepy, like that's it. But you really need to think about how things make you feel. Well, this makes me feel angry or anxious or afraid. Like, you need to be very thoughtful about explaining the way that you feel to someone. And again, it's very disarming, and you need to stick to your experience. Instead of like, hey, when you cut me off in that conversation, I feel like you don't care about my opinion. You could say that, or you could say, when you cut me off in conversation, I feel alone and disrespected. You're saying the same thing two different ways. One way is very disarming. Be specific. And again, this takes practice. You may need to practice on someone beforehand or go over what you're going to say. The next point, avoid shoulds. And I struggle with shoulds. So you're like, no, here's what it is. You ever know someone that's like, you should have done this? I often say this to my wife. You should have thought about this before, because then this wouldn't have happened. You should plan better. You should write things down, and then we wouldn't be in this mess. You should have taken a left back there, and then we wouldn't be lost. You ever talk like that to someone? In this confrontational kind of way? Should has a very parental and judgmental feel to it. And my wife has very lovingly had to tell me sometimes, you're not my dad. So when like someone else knows that. Yeah, that's right. You're a husband. You're not our father. It makes people feel guilty, ashamed, and angry. When you're telling someone what they should do, that person's not thinking, wow, that was such helpful input. Can you follow me around and evaluate everything that I do? That's not what they're thinking. And so if you're like me and you're prone to the you should, be careful. Because good confrontations, they preserve someone's dignity. They feel good about themselves still. It preserves their choice and their freedom. They don't feel controlled by you. You want to be heard as helpful, not controlling. Avoid using should. Now, the last one is simply this: be an agent for change. Be an agent for change. Now, this is tough, but I think this is the most important thing, because sometimes we enter into confrontation because we've really been hurt by someone. And we're kind of angry. And we kind of just want them to know how angry we are, and we want them to kind of feel bad about that. But as we enter into confrontation, even though bad things have occurred, we need to try to make the situation one in which good things can happen for the person and for the relationship. And why is that? There's something very powerful about the one who is being hurt being the one who wants to help. And isn't that what Jesus did for us? That in all of our sin and our rebellion, the one that we were really hurting the whole time was him, and yet he came down to help us. And it's that power of the gospel that changes so many of our lives. It's that grace that he showed us that said, yes, your whole life you've spent sinning against me, but I love you and I've come to help you. That radically changes someone. Jesus was willing to enter our mess, and he had tough conversations with people. The woman at the well, hey, why don't you go get your husband? Well, I don't have a husband. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. He's walking with his disciples. They're arguing about who's going to be the greatest. He's like, hey, what are you guys talking about back there? He enters into that. Peter's like, no, you're not going to go to the cross. He's like, Peter, what are you saying? He's like, no, Lord, you're not going to go to the cross. Get behind me, Satan. Now, don't ever call someone Satan. That's just Jesus, and he's got his way about him. But you see, like, he's entering into these conversations, but it's to help and to bring about change. Guys, when you think about confrontation, you need to go into it being change agents, because that's the best kind of confrontation there is. But as I wrap this up and kind of release you guys to have some question time where you're at, when was the last time someone told you you were wrong? You personally, when was the last time someone entered into your space and said, hey, I got to have a talk with you, because of course, me teaching on this, God had it happen to me. And as I'm preparing and I'm getting all expertise on what it means to have confrontation, someone says, hey, I got to talk to you. Can I talk to you? Yeah, sure. And as he begins to talk, how dare you? Don't you know I'm right at everything? And my defenses started to go up, but by God's grace, the conviction came. He says, no. You take this. And as I sat there and I took it, I was like, you know what? You're right. And I want to be better. And so I want to hear that. In Proverbs 12:1, whoever loves instruction loves knowledge, but he who hates correction is stupid. Yes, the word stupid is in the Bible. So listen to this, though. Listen. You should all want to be better. Better spouses, better parents, better employees and employees. We should want to be better. And if we're going to get better, we're going to have to invite people into our lives. All of us need a few people that can tell us the truth about who we are. But many times those people need to be invited. You know, you think about one of the greatest confrontational conversations, David and Nathan. David sins, thinks he's gotten away with it. Nathan the prophet comes into his life, tells him this story. David's all mad. Oh my gosh, who could do this? It was you. Thank God for Nathans. Who's your Nathan? Who's that person that you've invited in to say, hey man, when I'm off, I need you to tell me. And it's going to hurt, and it's not going to be comfortable, but it's what's best. And when you think about who we are as a church and where we're headed over the next 5 years, our church, we're on mission to do what? Okay, 4 of you know that we're on mission to make disciples. We're on mission to make disciples. That is the mission of our church. Matthew 28:19 and 20. And Proverbs 27:17 kind of puts it this way. As iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. You ever like old school, like sharpen a knife? You're like, what does that mean? Some of you. Okay, so you got like a piece of metal and a knife, and you do this, and sparks fly. But in that, the knife is getting sharper, and the Bible says that's kind of what discipleship is like. So if you want to be someone that's in this with us, saying, yeah, I want to be part of that, I want to make disciples, you need to know how to do confrontation the right way. And not only how to give it, but how to receive it. Because from the moment we get saved, it's all about confrontation. Someone in your life came to you and said, hey, you know there's sin in your life that has separated you from God? That's not a fun conversation, but it's necessary. But God did something, and he wants to save you and rescue you. And from the moment of our salvation to the time that we go home to glory, our lives are filled with confrontational conversations that should be making us better. And that's what it means to enter into this. And if we're going to be serious about making disciples, we got to be serious about confrontation. And I hope that some of these things have better equipped you to do that. So now, where you're at, I want you to get in groups of 3 or 4 at the most. Hold up the number 4. Okay? Can you guys, it's not a trick thing. Okay. No more than 4, because I want you guys to be able to talk. I'm going to give you guys about 10 minutes. There'll be some questions up on the side for you to discuss in those groups, and then I'll come back and close you guys out. All right, everybody. You don't have to stop your conversations. You can continue, but we're going to close our time here tonight. Just want to remind you that if you want to be part of the story, if you want to get into the story and find out those things that we're doing over the next 5 years as a church, there is a party happening tonight right behind the grill. Pastor Doug will be over there. I'll be over there. We encourage you to be a part of that. But again, you can continue your conversations right now. We'll see you guys this weekend. God bless you.